Relations between China and the United States have been at a knife edge over the weekend after the discovery of a suspected Chinese spy balloon. Well, let's not say expected, we know what it was. It was no weather vane, was it? Over the United States. Initially travelling into the US via Alaska and Canada, the balloon spent 7 days floating across the United States. The decision to not immediately shoot it down spurred criticism from the Republicans, calling out Biden's position as weak on China. But on Saturday, President Biden shut it down.
When I was briefed on the balloon, I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. We'll have more to report on this a little later. Thank you.
Mr. President, what does it say about China? What's your message to China?
You were saying the recommendation was from your national security.
I told them to shoot it down.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
But the recommendation
They said to me, let's wait till the safest place to do it.
I think there's some fascinating detail in how all this played out, and joining me now to discuss it all is the head of Peter Jennings Strategic Consultants, Peter Jennings. Peter, let's start at the beginning. What do we know about this balloon and how did it make its way to America? Was it only detected when it crossed the border from Canada?
We don't know a lot about the balloon, Peter, other than that US officials have said the payload, the intelligence gear underneath the balloon was the size of 3 large buses, which does rather give you a sense of how much gear was packed into it. It seems that the US first detected the balloon as it came over the Aleutian Islands, which means to say that it would have been released in northern China. And I think something that's interesting about it is that it clearly has the capacity to manoeuvre under powered flight, because it wasn't just being sort of buffeted around by the trade winds. It was able to loiter for a significant period of time over Montana, which is where a number of the American intercontinental ballistic missile fields are located. And so that means to say that, it becomes not just an intelligence gathering instrument as it moves past, but it can actually stay in a location for a period of time, which would add, more value to the intelligence that it could gather.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm presuming as it's floating past these installations, it's tracking, reporting, picking up information and sending it back to China pretty much at that instance. I mean, China don't need to gather it back up and download the information on it. And if that's the case, what do you make of criticism levelled at the president that they took too long to bring it down? That, potentially lost 3 or 4 days of critical information that it was picking up being sent back to Beijing.
Well, look, I've got to speculate a little bit to answer the question, Peter, but my guess would be that once it was identified for what it was, an intelligence gathering asset, the Americans would have certainly shut down any signals emissions coming from those military bases, and perhaps have spent a bit of time actually sending decoy signals out in ways to test how that would impact on the balloon's information gathering capabilities, all with the intention to ultimately recover the balloon after it had been shot down, so they can sort of re-engineer the intelligence technology. So broadly speaking, I think the Biden administration did the right thing, and that was to say they made sure that they could bring this thing down in a location, one, that was not going to threaten American civilians, but 2, was in about 12 or 15 metres of very shallow ocean and therefore easier to recover. After, I would very much hope, having played a little bit with the minds of Chinese intelligence gatherers with some, a range of fake signals that might have been emitted over the last few days.
All right, I've got to leave that part of our chat there, but while I've got you, over the weekend, there's quite a lot of material in the News Corp papers about overhauling our elite special forces, in particular the SAS. There's a new report sent to the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, from an independent oversight panel appointed by Defence. And one of the conclusions they've drawn is the SAS needs more women and it needs more diversity if they're to reduce the risk, they say, of unethical actions on the battlefield. Now, more women laudable aim, but this is the SAS. It's incredibly tough to get into. Will this mean they'll attempt to lower standards? I mean, how do you read these recommendations?
Look, I'm concerned with this on a number of plans. One, that there is an imputation that the Special Forces generally were lacking in ethical values. I don't think that's correct, when what was being dealt with was allegations of essentially criminal behaviour against a small minority. Whatever this report recommends, it can't undermine the military value of the Special Forces. I think that's what government needs to be focusing on right now, Peter, and less of this sort of nod of the head in the direction of diversity. What does that mean? It seems to mean anything other than people thinking differently. And frankly, I'm a little bit worried about what that implies in terms of the so-called fix that's necessary to make the Special Forces better prepared for military operations.